I'll put my glasses on just to do this and we can give him an applause. Tonight you're going to meet a Silicon Valley pioneer and legend. He was there at the birth of two of the largest industries in history, video games and personal computers, both now valued in trillions of dollars. He created the first successful video game and gave Steve Jobs his first legitimate job in tech. And the legendary Atari, which I played, just saying. Your descendants will never believe you met him. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Al Alcorn.
Well, thank you for having me here. Wow, it's a great crowd. I'm delighted so many people are interested in this old story. Glad to come here and tell this because my wife was with me all along the whole path. The last thing she wants to hear is another one. So I got my start in electronics at a very early age. I was precocious. I wanted to know how everything worked. And I was tearing apart TV sets, and my father got me a correspondence course in radio, television, electronics repair from RCA. And I was in junior high school. And fortunately, I had a neighbor across the street who had a television repair shop. So I got good at that. And I was fixing TVs for some of the teachers and going down there after school and fixing TVs and making some extra money. And it was, and I was always, as a problem child, I was always bringing back in those days, you could go down to Market Street and there were real World War II surplus stores there. You could buy electronics and stuff like that real cheap and tear it apart. So that was me back in those days. I was also, as you know, in Berkeley, and it was in Berkeley in the 60s. And my father was a Merchant Marine deck officer shipping napalm to Vietnam. My brother was a police officer in Concord. They would come down to campus occasionally and throw some tear gas at us. And there's a picture of me back when, I guess it was the invasion of Cambodia. When we invaded Cambodia, that became a big deal. And so we had to go out into the community. Classes were diminished. Some canceled, but you still had to do the work. And we were going to go down as a group of engineering students to Lockheed, down up here in Lockheed. We're going to drive down and informational pickets, nothing mean or anything, but just saying, hey, you know, you're building weapons that are killing people, maybe you should think about it. Anyway, this barber was giving away free haircuts on a Monday, because if you had hippie hair, that was a stupid thing, so I got a free haircut. And I'm on the front page of the Daily Gazette getting a free haircut. So not many of you guys have ever had your picture in the front page of the paper for getting a haircut. This was the lab. I worked at Ampex Video File. So what happened was about my junior year in college, and the Vietnam War was going on, so there was some real charm to being in college at the time. You get a deferment. My brother's friend, unfortunately, went to Vietnam and lived about 3 months. Very sad. It was a horrible time. And but anyway, so here we were at Ampex. This is a video file division. That's a picture of Rocky, who's the technician. And in the background, you see that big tape drive. That's a 2-inch videotape tape drive, and that we were experimenting with putting digital data on videotape. And but that's where we kind of began. And Nolan was working in that same group. Most of the team was there. Nolan is the real driving force of this whole thing. And none of this I would have done any of this. I thought it was all stupid and crazy and fail. But Nolan had, oh, no, it's going to be $1 million industry. Sure. So when Nolan was in college at University of Utah, by the way, he's proud of the fact that he graduated last in his class. He got a job at Lagoon Corporation that's had an amusement park, and he ran the pinball arcade, which was very important to understand that business. the distribution channel, or who makes the machines, how do you rotate them, collecting, all that stuff. So he had that experience. He also, at the University of Utah, was one of the few schools that had a PDP-1 that was playing Space War. You go to the Computer History Museum, and they have a PDP-1 running, playing Space War. And if you're at the right time, you can go and get a chance to play. I actually had a chance to play Steve Russell, who invented it, so that was great. And then Nolan and Ted Dabney. I don't know how many of you guys have ever heard of a common phrase in the Silicon Valley called a G job? You ever heard of it? Nobody. Well, I guess it's an old one. Yeah, G job. It's when you're using your company's facilities to do private work. The best one I heard of was somebody at Lockheed that had a really nice hot rod car, and he blueprinted the whole thing, took it all apart, perfecto, aircraft, space age precision. That was a G job. And Nolan and computer space, because computer space played at University of Utah, Nolan said, you know what? If I could put a coin slot on that thing, I could sell it. It would sell very well. The only problem was it was $1 million computer, and in those days, $1 million was a lot of money. And you know, and it just didn't work out. You had to buy a mini computer. It didn't work. Well, he and Ted figured out how to get rid of the computer and eventually reduce it to just logic, just 7400 series TTL logic, that it was coming out because of the mini computers and whatnot. That was a dominant technology, TTL. They were about 25 cents a chip, maybe less. And so they did computer space, and they licensed it to Nutting Associates, the only other coin-operated amusement manufacturing company west of the Rockies. And they happened to be right there in Sunnyvale, or Santa Clara, I don't remember which. And that's what they did, but they never sold it. They licensed it and they got royalties. It was a very hard game to play if you ever played Space War or Computer Space. Very difficult. They sold some machines, but not a lot. So, and then from the royalties they bought pinball machines, and they had a route in the Bay Area of about around Sunnyvale of about 25 or 30 pinball machines, and that would provide the cash flow. We had no investors. We started the company. The company was called Syzygy, S-Y-Z-Y-G-Y, which is a great word for hangman. It's a real word, so that's in the dictionary. So I suggested, but we soon found out that we couldn't use the name because somebody else had it already. So the next choice was Atari. That was Nolan, so okay, fine. And no one understood the distribution, so we had that. And coin-op was great because we were not missionary marketing. We had an arcade machine that could fit right next to a pinball machine. And to me, the goal was to make the game so easy to play, it was just obvious. In fact, at one point when I got the game pretty well finished, and I showed it to Nolan and Ted, they said, well, where's the instructions? I said, Nolan, if you have to read the instructions to play a game, you've already lost. It's obvious. And Pong was designed so you could participate in athletics while maintaining a firm grip on a can of beer. Okay. So and Nolan told me to design this pinball game. He was giving me an exercise to get practice. It was the simplest game he could think of. Magnavox Odyssey was the basic. It had no score. It really wasn't a game. It was an effect on the TV screen. But I figured out how to make a game out of it. And for example, if the ball starts bouncing at a certain speed so you start the game, it wouldn't be any fun. It'd be too easy. So as you got a few volleys, it sped up. It sped up 3 or 4 times. And that made it more fun to play. And then it had to have a score. And I had to do that. That was not easy. So I show it to Nolan. And, so the instructions were insert quarter. Done by then. All will serve automatically. And the last one is words I want on my tombstone. Avoid missing ball for high score. So that was it. Okay. And then Nolan said, oh, by the way, where's the sound? And, oh my God, I'm already over budget. This thing is a failure. I want to add more parts. What do you want? He said, I want roar, crowd, cheering. TTO parts. I had no idea. Ken says, I want booze and hisses. I couldn't do that either. So I said, okay. And I came back about half a day later, and I just poked around in the sync generator and found tones that seemed about right, gated them out, and that was it. If you don't like it, no one, go do it yourself. And then I read stories later on about how profound it sounded. Yeah, that was fun. And arcades were great. I like the old arcades. I like the criminal aspect of it. Now, the criminal aspect was a problem because we could, because of that, the common wisdom was the coin-op industry was all corrupt, payola and whatnot. We weren't, and we were being accused of it, and I figured, geez, corrupt me. I'm easily corrupted. But I never was corrupted. But anyway, we managed to do it. So there's the PDP-1 Space War, and I encourage you to visit the Computer History Museum on the weekend. That room is open. You can actually see a PDP-1. They're amazing machines. These old computers, they had no operating system. It was all core memory. So when you power them up, it starts up exactly where it left off when you turn it off. Interesting. And then at that point, mini computers, the business in the Valley was mini computers and military stuff. All the spook work going on. So mini computers, the emergence of that really provided a lot of cheap parts. The TTL parts were really, really good. Again, 25 cents a piece on the average. And then the other part that really helped was they had just come out with the 5-volt voltage regulator. Now, why is that important? These machines are in an arcade, and the typical operators, the way it works is a distributor, every city has a couple of distributors representing different manufacturers, and they would sell to their line of customers, which are used to dealing with pinball machines. So they have a big screwdriver and a file, and it would get a little tough repairing these things. And so if this thing wasn't set loud enough, well, the first 10 machines we made, we couldn't get that 3-terminal voltage regulator. I'm sure many of you know about that part. It's a very common part. No adjustments. Well, I had to put in an external power supply, and it had a knob on it. And they all came back because the operators would just turn the knob. Louder, faster, more money, whatever it was. So getting rid of that, putting it on a chip when you couldn't adjust it was actually made the product. So this is the team. Sexy. This might work. Let me see if I can. Yeah. So that's me. I had a lot more hair back then. That's obviously Nolan with the polka dot shirt. That's Pong. That's Ted Dabney. And that is, I'll just say Fred. Fred, we hired, we were making money, and we're all engineers. And so Fred was our bean counter, our financial officer. You can tell about a month into the process, we caught him stealing from us. Yeah, you think about it, some of these, one guy, Ted Dabney's brother, was just collecting machines. Didn't do anything more than that, had no engineering skills or anything. And he like me, no one gave him 10% of the stock at the time. He was stealing for his place. And you think about, the perception that this place is going nowhere. So that's the team that got us going. But it really was me and Nolan fighting a lot. He had these crazy ideas that I actually made work. Weird. This is a building on Scott Boulevard that we just had that was the headquarters, the world headquarters of Atari. And yeah, so he told me he had this contract from GE. He defined the game, and that became Pong. And we figured we're going to just throw it away, but I did it in about 2 months. And no one had built a cabinet for it over the weekend. Built a little cabinet like that. And in it, and this is at the Computer History Museum. Unfortunately, you can't see the back of it. This is a silly, cheap coin that company, find on a pony ride or something like that. The TV set was a $75 Hitachi, black and white. I bought it at Walmart and made it into a monitor. So it had sound, sound, and video. And this is the circuit. You can't really see it. But there's that 5-volt power supply that I had to get rid of. But yeah, there's a circuit for it, and it showed in there very well. But that was Pong, and that was the one that after about a week or two on location at Andy Cap's Tavern, one of our better locations, the machine stopped working. And it didn't surprise me because it was just thrown together. It was never meant to be in a very, very rough. So after work, I went down to go fix it. First thing you do is open up the cash box to give yourself a free play. You don't want to waste your time. And I opened up the cash because it was on, but you couldn't get it started. You couldn't make any money. Opened up the cash box. All these quarters fell out. Still full of quarters, it wouldn't take any more. So take with the location, with the bartender. And the next day I came into work with a sack of quarters saying, I found a problem. That thing's making too much money. Change the plans. Now this is a little lesson because I've seen a lot of companies, I've been through a lot of startup companies and seen a lot. And one common way of failure is you have a business plan. I'm going that way and nothing's going to stop me. Well, Jesus, if all of a sudden some door opens up on this side over here that seems more profitable faster, take it. If there's a fork in the road, take it. And that's what we did. And all of a sudden we became a Pong company. And initially, we were going to be, the initial role was to be a design company, and we would license the technology to Valley or other companies and receive royalty checks. This thing was making so much money that no one realized, wait a second, I want to be on the manufacturing side. We had no manufacturing capacity, nor did we have any money, which always puzzled me. We were stayed alive. Yeah, banks wouldn't loan us money because obviously we must have been in the mafia. VCs were not interested. There weren't many VCs around at that time anyhow. Now we're going to make cabinets. Well, it turned out P.S. Hurlbut in Santa Clara was a big cabinet making manufacturing operation. It was a Roman business, and they did a great job working with Nolan and made a cabinet. Now, Nolan picked the cabinet design carefully. He didn't want to see pictures of naked ladies on the side like pinball machines were. He wanted this to be a machine that ladies could play as well as men, which I think is a factor. It's not a macho type of killing or shooting game. And so he wanted a low-key thing. And then the other problem was the monitors. Where do we get the monitors? Well, I found Hitachi, and we just bought a lot of Hitachi monitors direct from the distributor down in LA. In which we caught our financial guy with his hand in the cookie jar. But we got all the monitors we want. Motorola, these were $75. And I had a production line that was turning them into monitors, television sets. We had piles of UHF antennas and instruction. and Motorola had a monitor back in those days. It was 1972. You remember in the airports back then, the displays were these green displays that were half busted all the time, and out of focus. That's what they were selling for $250. And they wanted me to buy that. I said, hell no, I'm just doing it. I'm paying $75. Give me those for $75 in a proper color, I might buy them. So this is a Pong board. This is an actual production version. There is the 5-volt regulator. So the whole power supply and everything is on this board, one board. And then there was just an edge connector going off to the potentiometers and whatnot. It was just quite simple. By the way, as an aside, that was done by Howard Kent, the layout. Back in those days, I had a schematic, a good schematic, and we give it to a PC layout artist. This gentleman was named Howard Kenton, and he would do tape-ups on Mylar, double size, and red lithograph tape, and he did a good job on it. If you ever take a look at the Apple II printed circuit board, you discover it looks a lot like this, because Howard Kenton did it. And our auction just now sold a check to Howard Kenton. The check was to pay for the layout of the Apple board, and it was for like $500 or something like that. That check sold for $2.5 million.
I feel so poor.
So there's the data sheet. See, it's still Atari syzygy engineer. He was still toying with that, but it went away. And that sold a lot of units. But one of the interesting things that the knobs, probably most of you guys have played the game, is if you're turning a knob, that's all you do. Well, it turns out the average control knob for television lasted about 2 weeks. I calculated if you put a 25-cent quarter in, you probably get at least 20 turns on that pot. I multiplied it up the life of the pot. It could last about 2 weeks. So we went down with Bradley. It was the top manufacturer of precision control electronics, and they made us an extra long life pot that would last maybe 6 months or so. But you know, in 6 months the machine made so much money the operators didn't mind replacing it. Well, you can ask questions, by the way. I'm easily interrupted, distracted. So then, after we had the Pong, we had to make the manufacturing organization, and that was kind of weird. So you saw that little building we got going. We could build 10 machines a day there. We rented a roller skating rink about a half a mile up the street, and hired people. No one hired people from the unemployment department, which was pretty spooky. We got trustees and very interesting, colorful people. Yeah, it turns out when you're only building one product, you don't need much documentation. You just need to know how to build a product. But when you introduce a new product, all hell breaks loose. We found out. And the other thing was that there were many, now the industry, the rest of the industry, this was the new thing, and everybody was copying us. They were making copies faster than doing it. And we didn't have patents. We didn't believe in patents at the time. And we figured that we could do something they couldn't. We could make the next game. So we would just make another game, and that would keep it going. So that's why we had a lot of variations. We did Space Race, Gotcha, games. We didn't do very well, but we had some games. And then we got an association with Grass Valley, because I was so over my head. I'm a 25-year-old kid, vice president of engineering of a rapidly growing company, and I could no longer sit down and think long term. We had a couple other engineers from Ampex moved up to Grass Valley the year before, and we hired them as our research group. And that's where the driving game came from and a bunch of other great things. Now here is, okay, this really tells the story. This is Nolan. Now, this is on Syzygy Stationery, August 3rd. We're like about a year old. 1 year old. We're making arcade video games. In accordance with a concise business plan, the following is the charter for engineering. This is from engineering, from Nolan to engineering. 1, have a minimum acceptable production ready. Yeah, you want an extra machine sitting around waiting to be released. Design manufacturing for Chicago type coin door, because our coin door was a disaster. It goes on. A custom designed 20-player gotcha for a trade show. Packaging for Dr. Pong. Now let me explain to Dr. Pong. Nolan was always trying to think of how we could sell more machines, how we could make the market bigger. None of the coin-op people ever did that. They just had bars, that's it. So if we could put them in doctors' offices, which we couldn't. They're cheap bastards and they didn't pay a lot, they would pay for it. But it was nice, it was trying to stimulate it. And then item 6, get item 6. Packaging and a printed circuit board for color modulated consumer Pong. That's an industry. That's item 6 on the list. Now, okay, academia stuff. Documentation, that's a good idea. Design a booth for a trade show. Are you kidding me? Every effort should be made to develop adequate staffing to handle this workload. Now, no one will are arguing about this. Statements concerning manufacturing capacity are inapplicable to the above design schedule. It's like, no, we have the manufacturing, how can you build it? I design it, it can't be built. You know, so I replied, engineering, date August 3rd. In accordance with your memo dated August 3rd, 73, will statements regarding our financial capability be applicable to the above design schedule? No one answered it very briefly. Okay, we're off the cliff. Full speed ahead. And that's when I decided I did not like being the VP of engineering. If any of you guys here have done that, you're not doing engineering, you're doing babysitting, kindergarten. And it's nice, you meet nice people, hopefully you hire smart people, but it's not engineering, and I'm an engineer, goddammit. So no one can do that. What I did was I gave coin-op engineering over to Steve Bristow, my number 2 guy, and I took on the consumer division. I remember there is a Stanford University library has the document, our first business plan ever, and in it is a fold-out org chart, all done by hand, pencil, before computers, of course, and it had a full list for all the positions in the consumer, all empty, all TBH, and one name at the top, me. Oh boy, and so okay, off we went, and that was an interesting process. I'll discuss that in a minute. Get going here. Well, came time to almost die. And instead of just dying like a normal company with no one had to accelerate it. So Nolan read a book, and he read a book that said the guys that got you to $1 million in sales won't get you any further. You got to fire all those guys and hire on a new team of pros that know how to do this stuff. Okay, so he basically puts me and all the execs on the beach and hires a bunch, pardon the expression, B-team players from Hewlett Packard. These are nice people, but they weren't the A-team, wasn't Bill Hewlett, and they didn't know what they were doing in the coin-op business, and startups. HP is the exact opposite of Atari. Sales plummeted, season management put aside, we almost went out of business. But the guys at Grass Valley had designed the driving game Grand Track, which is a great game. Unfortunately, under the leadership that they had in there, their design didn't quite work. There were a lot of failures in it. No one got the team together, got the old guys back, fired the new guys, and I sat down and redesigned Grand Track so it could be built, and the company then took off. Meanwhile, I get back to designing the custom chip. Now, I'd hired an engineer, Harold Lee, early on to design a custom chip, but it was because people were copying our machines so prolifically. I wanted him to design a custom chip we could put in every coin-op game, like a sync generator or something, that they couldn't get a hold of, and it would make it much harder for them to copy our product. He comes to me after about a month or two and says, Al, it's not going to work. Your technology is changing too fast. It'll be obsolete by the time it gets done. It takes about 6 months to do a chip. But I think I can put Pong on a chip. And he said, no one's been asking for that. So let's go do that. So basically a team that did that, I left going up to engineering. Harold Lee and myself designed the chip. My wife, who is a great wire wrap engineering tech, she built the thing, and Bob Brown wrote the test program. Because when you make a custom chip, you have to have a program that can run a Fairchild Century tester and test the chip in 2 seconds or better. If you don't, you're not in production. So we had 4 people design the thing, and much to my shock, we got the parts back, the goddamn thing worked. I was like, holy moly. We had no prep for it, we had no customer, we've not gotten any further, because I couldn't go any further, and now we got a product. And that's when Don Valentine got in, because we were in great trouble from what no one had done earlier. Don Valentine was like a vulture capitalist, going to get pieces at a real cheap price. We had pulled it out. We had pulled it out, got the thing running again, and the day Don Valentine came to sign the deal with a bottle of champagne and the whole thing, Nolan said, oh, we're doubling our price. We doubled, and our attorney went nuts. He says, yes, screw Don Valentine, and you're not getting funding into the valley ever. So he bought it, he did it. He realized that, yeah, he got too good a deal. So now what do we do? We got this chip. How do we sell it? We had no customers. I mean, there's nobody in Silicon Valley that would buy it. So one of our guys said, hey, we got this retail. There's a big place in Chicago called Sears Roebuck. They got that big tower in Chicago. Yeah, they're a big retailer. So he calls Sears Roebuck in Chicago, explains to the operator on the phone what we got. She was patient enough to look through the catalog to see that they were selling the Magnavox Odyssey game in the sporting goods department. Because he patches us up 2 sporting goods. Tom Quinn answers the phone, the buyer. Now this buyer had been fighting with Magnavox because they would let him sell the thing. He wanted to sell more. And we come in, we got the same thing, better and cheaper. He says, next time I'm out in California, I'll stop in and see you. He comes out 3 days later, wearing a suit and tie. None of us were. He gets there at 8 o'clock, none of us did. Everybody's dressed funny, but he saw what we had, and he believed it. He was the only guy, possibly the only guy in the industry that knew the value of that product. It was just a bolt of lightning in the ass. It was amazing. Because the FCC was a nightmare. I'm not going to talk about that. That was the real thing. But here's an interesting story. So we realized we got the Silicon. We had the meeting with Tom Quinn in Nolan and Joe's office, and he says, "How many can you build?" And we're looking at each other, and I guess like 75,000. What does it cost? And we came up with I thought it was gonna cost us like $50, something like that. No one said, we'll sell it for 110 or something like that, some ballsy number. And okay, and that was the Sears contract. He gave us an order for $150,000 at that price, our asking price. And off we went. And then we realized we're building these things in a little factory that we had that we're sole source to Sears. What if Sears coughs up? What if we literally would be out of business. We were rolling the whole company on this project because you have to buy all your material to build these things in the first 3 quarters of the year, and the last quarter is when you sell it. So you got to guess how many you're going to make, and you either guess too many or not enough. Learn from experience. Guessing a little bit, not enough, is much better than too many. Okay. So what we did was we're taking it to the New York Toy Fair, and we're going to show this product to all the other retailers and get another customer. So we did, and I was back there with my wife and Nolan and Joe and Jean, and I remember demoing the product, Pong, which is going to be pretty much the hit of the decade, to all the buyers at all the different Montgomery Wards, Macy's, you name it, all of them there. You know how many we sold? 0, not 1. Now that's pretty spooky. You know, am I in the right business? You know, what's going on here? Not 1. The next year they were all over us, but that year, so we had a sole source. So Sears was in a great spot. They had an exclusive. And I remember watching Monday Night Football one day, and there was an ad for Pong put out by Sears. We didn't know any of that. There were ads, we do any of that stuff. We just shipped machines to Sears and they send us checks. And, so that's an interesting story. Just because people don't like your product doesn't necessarily mean it's a failure. Oh, there's the consumer Pong prototype. Now that's a lot different. This is the work my wife did in wire wrapping. Much nicer. And we didn't have, I'm an electrical engineer, not a mechanical engineer. And so I figured, I'd put it in a case. Well, you just walk down to the store and buy 1,000,000 cases. And you have to do a plastic tooling. I learned the hard way that the tooling for the case costs more, takes longer than the chip. So I'm behind the power. And so this is the unit we demoed to Sears. At the Sears, there was a big day where I had to bring this stuff back to the Sears Tower and demo it to the execs at Sears now. This is a key thing. And this thing had a color modulator in there that ran on channel 3. So, you know, you turn your TV to channel 3. They had a Sears television they let me use on a cart, and I hook it up, nothing. Turns out they broadcast in channel 3 on top of the Sears Tower. So I have to open the bottom up and retune it to channel 4. So the execs now could see all this. And Carl Lynn, the boss, the buyer, his claim to fame was the air-conditioned electric blanket. You may have heard of. Anyway, he said, Mr. Alcorn, you're telling me that you're going to get that rat's nest of wiring on a little piece of silicone the size of your fingernail? Yes, sir. How are you going to solder the wires? Sort of God. How do you answer that question? We eventually gave the tour of the semiconductor factory. That's an idea how it's done. But yeah, that was what we were dealing with. We were really pushing the edge here of technology. And that's the production version. The gentleman's got one of them right there. That was actually the Sears Telegame. I'll just say about the FCC. The FCC rules were extremely hard. They were designed by the FCC for the Magnavox Odyssey. The Magnavox Odyssey was an analog game. It did not radiate power at high frequencies at all. My machine was a digital machine running very fast, it radiated like snot all in. And so it was hell. I went through an engineer trying to get it to work, but we did. So we had the only machine that could meet their FCC regs. Then the semiconductor company started to say, well, shit, we can build it better than Atari. What do they know about semiconductors? Well, National Semi, we done a pretty good job. There were two chips in there, a 125-cent hex inverter, and then our custom chip. And it's pretty hard to get it lower than that. And the boss at National Semiconductor, Tricky Dick Baker, said, oh, we could do better, what are you looking at? And gave it to their engineers, and the engineers opened it up and they said, holy shit. Next thing we know, the engineers come over to our place and say, can we work for you guys? They sold their entire design team. That was fun. Oh, it's time. Am I doing all right? Should I go on for a little bit longer? Oh, please. Okay. So I could go on. Dedicated, okay, so we were making dedicated games like the home Pong game, but that required a new custom chip every time. And it was pretty well known, pretty obvious, that a cartridge system would be much better, using a microprocessor and a cartridge with the ROM in it. So, and then the 6502 microprocessor made the parent. At that time, the Intel 4004, they were selling for hundreds of dollars. It was slower than you could imagine. It wouldn't work. But when the 6502 was fast enough, very, very thin system, and then so I basically, Grass Valley designed the VCS with the cartridge system, and with the help of the National Semiconductor Product Design Team, we made it pass the FCC radiation rules, which was very critical because nobody else could. And the FCC actually did a study because everybody was complaining they couldn't make it work. So the FCC did a study, said all the manufacturers, please send us a unit to look at and we can evaluate how close they can get to the regs. We submitted it for type approval, and we got approved. The report came out a month later saying it couldn't be done. And what we had done was on a footnote. And we was like, wait a second. And then I remember we were at Love Field in Dallas for the NFL one year, or that year. And there was Air Force One parked across the way. Why is that there? Oh, it's in for a tune-up. Oh, TI was all. We didn't know the politics, and so they had lowered the regs to make it possible for them to get in. And just like one little secret, the Atari 800, 400 home computer, the reason for that computer, that was going to be the only computer on the market because it met the rules, it met the regs. Nobody else could. And so we were going to say, hey, we got the only product on the market. Well, that didn't work either. They went around that. Then we sold it to Warner Communications in '76, and it was wonderful. The honeymoon was wonderful. Lasted a couple of years, and then they pretty much came to the conclusion that we're a bunch of idiots and didn't know what we were doing. And these guys from New York who knew nothing about startups, knew nothing about Silicon Valley, knew nothing about video games, they replaced Nolan and the management team with, in my opinion, B players. And but the VCS was such a hot product that it sustained for a decade. It came up allegedly $2 or $3 billion in sales. And then and if you don't obsolete my attitude is if you don't obsolete your own product, somebody else will. That's Silicon Valley, right? I mean, you got to keep moving. Whereas apparently Burlington Industries and Fabrics pretty much stays the same and exists. And then, oh yeah, and so Ray Kassar was so proud of what he had with Atari that none of what he built. Forbes magazine interviewed him in a lengthy article, and in that article, he took credit for pretty much everything, and then said, oh, the engineers, they're just a bunch of high-strung prima donnas. Yeah, 9 a dozen. So, but within a week, we had T-shirts out that said, just a high-strung prima donna. And now Ray had to wear one. I think he was in with the crowd. So, yeah. And then, oh yeah, then Atari finally blew it. So I think I'll let it go with that. The story does go on lengthy, but maybe you can ask some questions.
Are you going to come back to speak to the rest of it another time?
Well, that's an extra. I could talk about how Apple got started, but that's another story.
All right, questions. I asked that if you would, wait for the microphone so everybody can hear.
Yes, I remember the Pong machine. In 1978, I was at the State University of New York at the ice cream parlor in the basement of my dorm, and we had a Pong machine that came in. But it didn't look like that panel. It looked like a table almost.
Cocktail table.
Huh?
The cocktail table.
Yeah.
Cocktail table, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't see
Yeah,
that
that's
over
another
there.
story. Remember I said Nolan was always trying to find places he could sell more games?
Yeah.
That's, by the way, how Chuck E. Cheese came about. Because you put a pizza parlor, we had saturated the market, but we made a pizza parlor, but we could then add more games. But the cocktail table was one that Nolan tried, and none of the operators would buy it. None of them buy it because it's not the business they were in. So somebody in Stockton started had Nolan bill 50, which he gladly did. The guy put him on location and set him up with the bar, and then put ads in the paper selling business opportunity to people in Stockton who wanted to make all this money from the video game. The problem that he didn't disclose was video games have about a 1-year life at the most. And after that, they taper off to nothing. So you can see great earnings the first year, but it won't sustain. But anyway, that's what happened. Once the operators out here saw that this was working, hey, we want to get cocktail. That's when they started selling cocktail tables. So, yeah.
That console was very, very popular. I worked in the ice cream parlor part-time. But I think we sold, people spent as much or more time on that console than did at the ice cream parlor.
Yeah, that was weird, because I remember walking around Chicago at one of the trade shows, and I'm walking down Michigan Avenue, and I'm hearing this bar, and I'm hearing the sound of a Pong machine. Yes, sir.
Yes. So it's been well reported, if I remember correctly, that more ET cartridges were made than systems available.
Say that again. I'm not hearing.
More ET cartridges were made than systems
ET.
available. How did that decision come about?
Okay, the ET story. Atari was in the billions of units of sales, and Steve Ross. I mean, now we were making more money than any other part of Warner Communications. More money, just money. So Steve Ross, the chairman of the board of Warner, is flying from LA to New York with Spielberg. And he cuts a deal for, I think it was like $10, $15 million to use the name ET, to make a thing about it. And that was really, from his standpoint, a way of giving $10 or $15 million to Spielberg to make him happy using Atari's money. Well, he gets off the plane and he calls up Ray. He says, "Hey, I just got you the name ET for a cartridge. Isn't that wonderful? And by the way, send a $15 million check to Steven Spielberg." And Ray, by now had learned that this was not a simple process, and he had to get this thing out. And that's how the ET got to, and nobody could do it. There was one engineer that said, "Well, I could put it together, but in the time you have remaining, it's not going to be any good." He said, "I don't care, I've got to have it out." And that was Ray's work, and that was a huge flop. And because of the amount of money that we had to pay out, we knew how many we had to build, which was like, 5 million more than we could ever sell. So that's how they wound up in in the landfill.
I have a little corollary to that. So after Atari, the games, or the home computer and home video game part was sold to Jack Tramiel, formerly of Commodore, they started getting back broken Atari 2600 consoles that were absolutely perfect, surely,
Sure.
but they had no record of the serial numbers.
Well, here's what happened. So you think you're selling in December or November to a retail store that's going to sell it and send you money, right? Not a consignment sale. It's a sale. They thought it was a consignment sale. So all the ones that didn't sell after January, they break the box open and say they're defective and send them back.
No, they hadn't even manufactured them. They had no record of the serial
Oh,
number.
I don't know anything about that. All I know is that a lot of them, that's how those guys work. But I
The
don't know.
thinking is that Stephen Ross was, shall we say, connected, and that there was some plant or some plants that were manufacturing 2600 consoles, that the profits weren't going, the sales weren't going. for
They were getting Atari chips to put in them somehow.
somehow.
I
They-
can't-
apparently the labels even.
There were a lot of chicanery and stupid stuff that went on, but that one, I don't know about. I doubt not heard that.
So anyway, there might have been more consoles that were actually being sold than Atari got any record of, because they weren't actually made by Atari.
So besides Pong, what was your favorite game to work on, and what was your favorite game to play?
Ooh, I would have to say it was Pong. I mean, it was my baby, and I remember one time I was at a classic gaming convention, and they had a bunch of old machines on play, and there was an original Pong cabinet upright, and there's a 10-year-old boy playing it by himself. So I go over and I say, I'll play it with you. So I'm playing it, and I beat him. And I say, you know, kid, at one time I was the best Pong player in the world. That's how you do it.
Hi. Do you have any stories about the genesis of the breakout game?
Oh, God, got a lot of stories about that. Yeah. I mean, the middle of the story is I come into work one day. You know, typically I'd have an engineer and a tech, maybe two engineers and a tech, working on a game. It would take 2-3 months to build a prototype and get it working. And we'd be monitoring it every week. We'd have meetings and reviews. And I come into work one morning, and there's Jobs and Woz. Woz hung out at our place. He worked at HP, but he liked our place better. And Jobs says, "Oh, look what I did." And there's a finished breakout game. Wasn't even on the schedule. It was like a finished game made all by itself, with none of my help. This is strange. And I looked at the schematic, and Steve says, "I did it." And we go, "Bullshit." What happened was no one would come in here, and he has the attention span of a golden retriever. So he would come in to work, and if he wasn't distracted by something else, he'd go into engineering and do a product review extemporaneously. I wasn't there. And he'd change the product. He'd make it better, probably, hopefully. But he delayed the product, and I went to Noah. I said, "No, if you keep doing this, we're not going to get anything out of here." And he, I know. I says, but he still couldn't stop. So I had my secretary get a pager for me. So before cell phones, and anytime Noah went engineering, I got paged. Go into engineering, stand there behind him, and he'd say, "It was Pitt," and then I'd say, "Back to what you were doing," and send it back. And, you're right. Well, then he got the one engineer that I wasn't watching, Steve Jobs. You didn't know that Steve's not an engineer. You didn't know that. So Steve would amplify his credentials, shall we say. And so he said, "I'll give you He defined breakout, and he says, I'll give you $1,000 a chip for every chip less than 50 that you make breakout with. Pong had 76 chips. There was no way you could do less than that and make all those other things. Well, no one didn't say you had to be able to buy the chips, okay? So he was getting chips out of HP. 24 chips in the goddamn thing. I mean, and it was unbelievable. I mean, I couldn't understand. It was just the most. Woz is a savant. He's absolutely amazing guy. And eventually we gave that design to a normal engineer who redesigned it with 90 chips. And it was a hit game, and that's the story of Breakout. Although there's the story about how Woz found out that it was $1,000 a chip, not $100 a chip. That seemed to me to be the end of the friendship between Woz and Jobs. What of his Jobs had lied to him. It's all in the service. I mean, if lying is a problem, I wouldn't be here. All the time. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Who came up with Space Invaders?
Space Invaders.
How are you doing, Ed Rock?
We got pretty good Japanese guys.
But given everything you've been through and what you've seen and done, if you had to go back into the past with what you know today, what would you change and why?
You know, well, I don't think I'd change anything because the circumstances that just materialized in the fun of working with Joe and Nolan and those guys, we did not take ourselves seriously. When Co-op distributor meeting in Chicago, Mr. Nakamura of Namco, our big distributor in Japan, who went on to do very well, he was giving a talk. He doesn't speak English, he says. And he gives a talk, and we said, oh, Gene Lipkin, our sales guy from Florida, he speaks Japanese, and so he was translating. Mr. Nakamura said, he doesn't speak any Japanese. He just do that to their own customer. It was our customer. You don't hear about that often.
Are there any stories that you haven't shared very widely that you want to set the record straight about?
Stories, but so that I really don't want to. I will say one thing. I was going to think of we had a lot of parties. I think women in general felt it was a great place to work. We were very egalitarian. We had a lot of fun. Everybody was pretty happy about it.
When was the first version of Pong that could be played single player? You mentioned the 10-year-old playing with himself, and I imagine the reason it was a 2-player game was so it could be stupider on the inside, but like at a certain point, you had to were you involved in the development of this thing has to seem like it's artificially intelligent and playing Pong against me with some kind of logic that's not utterly rote?
First off, I really didn't like the one-player thing. We never made one. And
Oh, no.
No, we never made one. And I didn't think it would play. The whole thing was the interaction and the play, and I think it was great because 2 people could play together and get drunk at the same time.
Amen.
I think maybe it's a myth, or is it the truth, that the first Pong game was at Andy Capp's in the bar? I mean, I was there not too long ago, it's now Rooster T. Feathers. Why isn't there a plaque on the door that says this is where the first Pong game? Of course, I sent an email or a text to the mayor.
What, is the plaque still there?
No, there is not a plaque.
Just want to outline it for the internet.
There is not a plaque that the first Pong game
Yeah, I know. Is
was.
that plaque still there?
There is no plaque.
Yeah. I guess it's over 50 years old, history moved on.
No, it should be there.
No, we'll start a petition tonight for everybody in the room.
And one other thing, I was telling my daughter I was coming to this meeting, and she said, "Oh, I remember playing Pong on our TV set." She said, "You bought."
You'd think they'd have one, and they'd buy one and have one.
Okay, so there are a lot of historians in this room, and so anyway, we're going to launch a campaign, get a plaque, have it edited, and put on the door there, so everybody's going in Rooster Teeth Feathers can see it. And I just want to say, my daughter, I told her I was coming to this meeting tonight, and she said, oh, she was so excited she wanted to meet you, because she remembers playing Pong on our TV set. She said, Mom, you bought us a game, you know, when I was a little girl. She said, how old is he? I said, I didn't say anything, but I realized all of you guys were about 22, you know, you're so full of yourselves, the young engineers. We knew a lot of young engineers.
In fact, when Manny Gerard, the president of Warner, he was the guy in charge of buying us, when he came out and looked at us early, he says, what happens when you turn 30 in this company? Is there a pit you throw him in? Okay. One more question. Back here.
How did you settle on the name Pong to describe it?
So Nolan and I were at IEEE, a small gathering about the size of this. And it was full of reporters, historians, people from the library at Stanford, and they were asking questions. It was really interesting, and Nolan and I, of course, we disagree on those things. And the question was asked, who came up with the name Pong? And I immediately pointed to Nolan, and Nolan immediately pointed to me. And the fact was, it did not seem important at all. It was just a name that had 4 letters in it. And that was it. It didn't seem important. We did it. The funnier story about the name, though, when Warner bought Atari, they wisely went to one of their Madison Avenue advertising bigwigs or companies and had them kind of puff up our image and our logo and everything. And so they did a study first to see the awareness and acceptance of that, of the name and the logo. And they discovered that it had better awareness than Mickey Mouse. Don't change anything. And it was funny because that cost $100,000. The actual artwork for the original Fuji logo cost us about $8,000 from George Opperman, but that was funny. Good job. Okay, thank you very much.